Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Yeah. A little commentary on that. So working it from a different vein and coming out of this about 3.5 years retirement. And then I was very blessed at the end of my career as they would let me run amok with the evidence response team. And I had an incredible team. They were just very hungry. And we would go out and take these old cases and companion cases with the PDs and start tearing them apart forensically. So the phenomena I saw with this kind of this anti-police sort of mindset and this lessening of immunity over here, the police are somewhat afraid. The detectives are afraid, so they rely on technology. So it goes into the lab and they wait passively for that to come back out, and they're afraid to get in somebody's face and stomp on them. And there's mistakes made. I mean, Chris Tapp made a confession, exoneration, great exoneration that happened over here, but ultimately he confessed. Now, we can argue all day about what happened on the confession, how long they leaned on him, and what they're going to allow us. That's a court decision and everything else. But in that same vein, like you said, you have to have those people and have to have those strategic interviews. But over time, and let me inject this, I tell them, everybody who comes to me, and I talk to the forensic types mostly, and I do a little bit of training for them as well to prep for that IAI certification test, which is brutal. I put it somewhere beneath like maybe paramedic, but certainly above that 100 some odd hour EMS. That's the level of expertise there. And literally, if you're not working forensics, you would be really hard pressed to pass that test because it's so complex. So I said, you guys are the ambassadors. You have got to take and give that information delivered to the detectives, because they're the guys who come from the ranks and they're on par with the chiefs. It's not going to come through the forensic people, but you've got to take that and transmit it for usable information to them, so they understand that sitting in the evidence locker could be very good information that can solve that. And if you sit passively and wait for a detective to tell you, they're not going to have the knowledge that you have about bloodstain patterns, about certainly DNA. I mean, we could go all day long. I said, additionally, if you go pre-1970s, the law really didn't allow for retention of a lot of this stuff. Court records, right. Yes, but it gets lost, man. So get past that. If it's gone, it's gone. And if you had a possible out there, you're going to get, and I think, Joe, when I eventually read your book, people's allegiance and alliances changes sides, especially former girlfriends and ex-spouses, because they're either terrified, right, and get them out of there and get them talking. And what I found with a lot of them is there's just like, well, the police wanted to come talk to me. They knew where I was at all these years. And I have to explain to some folks out in LA and the film producers, I said, there is not a murder board behind you like Homicide: Life on the Street, where they have it and they're reviewing. They go, how about this one from 1978? Doesn't exist. Forget it. They don't even know it happened. And Joe, we're old enough to remember you had to log long distance phone calls when we came on.
Yep.
So how good are you possibly going to be, So get past that, tear that evidence bin open, look who's changed sides or who was potentially it. And another, as long as I got my hand on the throttle again, I called an agent on a pretty prominent case. He's 85 years old, made his year to call him about it. I said, and there was no success to it. I said, did you ever have an inkling of who did it? He said, unfortunately, no, but I remember it like yesterday. But if he said, we knew it was the blank, the boyfriend, the ex-husband or something, we just couldn't put it down, man, that supercharges it, and you just go get that DNA and you're on your way. So many of these things are just low-hanging fruit. Like you said, just roll it out. Yeah, you can tell I got a bit of a passion for this as well. So, yeah, and other people will bring back things to the equation, or our gumbo, right? Our cold case gumbo. And soon you're like, oh, yeah, we corroborated that. Example, before I shut up here, I'm going to bet you. So the Lindsay Wade example is like getting Ted Bundy's DNA into CODIS.
Yes.
You're kidding me, right? But I'm sitting here saying we had John Brennan Crutchley right near here, the vampire rapist, and Christopher Wilder came through here. He actually murdered a classmate of my wife's from this area right here. And then down in South Florida, I knew somebody who was murdered by him as well. Small world, right? But just those two alone, I think he was Tallahassee where I went to school. All those connections, probably not in CODIS at all. You know, I mean, he died in a gun battle, but Brennan Crutchley died in prison. So I'll bet you his DNA's not out there. And you're talking about that's probably low-hanging fruit clearances alone right there. And we're, you know, arguing over lab budgets and stuff. It's absurd. So right there with you.
Yeah, and
turn it back over you.
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you, you know, when we put together, or when our group at NCIS, we put together a checklist, right? So the first thing is get the case organized, right? Have you got everything that exists? And the very second step is to go to the evidence locker, go to the property room, and is the evidence there, right? And not only go there and believe the documentation that you have in the file, whether that be evidence custody documents or a chain of custody or whatever, but physically review it, right? And what does that look like? Oh, wow. Now, because is it still in the box? Because as you alluded to earlier, some of these old cases, evidence is lost, evidence is destroyed, evidence, perishes in a fire at a sheriff's department. I mean, there's 100 reasons, but I agree with you. And I think what surprises me so much, Tom, is, having been intimately, on the start of a cold case unit in 95, and to look, 30 some years later now, that we are still walking through evidence lockers looking for the old evidence. And I'm like you, it's low hanging fruit. It's like, oh my gosh. And then, DNA has gotten a lot better. I mean, if you go back to some of the original DNA that we use in this country, RFLP, that never got into CODIS, right? That extraction and amplification method was never even in CODIS. And if you think about CODIS went online about 98, I remember working with Jennifer Lindsay at your lab at the FBI. Think of some of those people are now being released, right? For murders, convicted in the late 90s. Now they're out, and people are going, why is this DNA not? Well, maybe it was maybe it was an arrestee state, convicted offender state. It never got uploaded. But I will say this, I do think IgG is the future of cold case. A lot of people, have that feeling as well. I think that's where it's going. And to your point, technology, is really the game changer today. And you said it, not me. So I just want to jump on it. This defund the police movement, officers are very risk averse, right? Detectives are more risk averse because of things that you could do years ago is prohibited today, right? And the feeling of detectives in general is not what it used to be in terms of just bystander behavior. On a hot homicide today, folks won't even open their door for a neighborhood canvass. And so you've got to rely on some of these things. But the book talks about, what in technology, what I think is, for some detectives is just, which comes secondhand to you, Tom. You pick up a lab report. Here you see it's a partial profile, primary contributor, right? Mixed stain. These things jump out right at you. And I applaud you for encouraging all those CSIs, right? And those forensic folks, whether they're, from an official capacity or not, because that's one of the challenges right now with the detectives working the case is they don't have that thorough forensic background, even in simple things like bloodstain pattern analysis, like you said. So it's a critical part, right? The folks doing the crime scenes for sure, and the follow-up forensics. And then depending on where you're at in the country, criminalistics is much better on, say in California than it is here in North Carolina. Some CSI units in the South, it's more of a collateral duty. Many of those positions are non-sworn, right? So they don't have the status or the stature in their departments as the sworn personnel. And I'm always encouraging the detectives, look, you have to trust the crime scene techs. You have to trust the people because they have knowledge you don't have. I mean, we have one of our departments here in North Carolina, it's the city of Durham, extremely well-qualified crime scene techs, most of them. And most of these young guys and gals have advanced forensic degrees, whether it's George Washington University or another forensics program. And so they're bringing right out of the gate, they might only be 22 or 23 years old of age, but man, they have great depth with, how forensics work. And, that some of your common detectives don't have that knowledge.
That same kind of mindset, what we're talking about is that you're detaining somebody on the scene And I use the example of bloodstain pattern, and I'm going, why are you letting this guy go? I mean, if there's a void where blood should be, that's the easy one. But even just and if you get IAI certified, you'll know a bit of bloodstain pattern. I mean, the scene should make sense to you. So getting those detectives to mesh up with it, and then they rely on the lab, and it's an unfortunate thing is the passivity. It's hard to get people into detective bureaus because they don't want to get sued. They really don't want to deal with it. And why would you do? And so some of the contacts I have, I talked to them. I said, how is it like these days? And they're like, well, we're not even doing traffic stops. Why? I don't want to complain against me because I'm going to be, tied up with that and everything else. And I'm going, okay, we got to get back to that. I mean, I know it's cyclical, predates me a little bit, but 68, what I've read about was very passive, and things changed again. And I think things are going to change again. There's got to be some kind of exemption for the police to do that. But I do think that a checklist on how to work through this is going to be very helpful, a roadmap. And they use that, by the way, in bloodstain pattern, create as a roadmap of what this stain is and everything else. So it can't be that far away from it. It's if we can get politics removed from it, we might move someplace. But in the meantime, this ad hoc, using these good tools for us and getting those technicians to become apostles of carrying that message forward. Example, as long as I'm rambling on here, is we had a school shooting, and it was handled well. It was in the middle of a blizzard. We responded down to it, and the whole government and everything was closed. And here we are moving through the snow, and this unfortunate school shooting took place. And afterwards, I was able to get a Faro scanner after that. That changed things. But we need other crime scene units because we don't scan the scene. We're just degrading that scene. We're not getting stuff. We're sitting on evidence. And it was a very slow process. So we borrowed something from the military. We had some guys, ComCam, the combat cameramen, come over and do some work with us. Well, they do very effective sensitive site exploitation. They know what it means, and this is Jared and us from Ranger School. You don't sit on intelligence, which is kind of lost to the police department. Now, the detectives do that really well, but a 24-hour turnaround on something, you could do it right then, and the good detectives do. They're looking right at the casing and seeing the impact mark from the primer, and they know they're looking at, they're looking at a Glock right away. The good ones will. But we could do a better job at that, to get that turnaround because it's sitting in there. That's something we borrowed from them, and I think that's something we can do better at. And the way we carry that message forward is by those forensic pros, because like you said, they're so good. They're coming out with master's degrees from the universities, and they can literally they're literally using the same books for the IAI certification, so they practically have it memorized when they come to the test prep on this. I'm astounded how good they are compared to when I went up to the Baltimore, D.C. area, and they're fantastically well trained. So my point about that, if I can summarize it, was I had a talk with the boss, and I said, "Sir, ma'am, I cannot sit back passively when we have an active shooter and then decisions are being made." As this is an evolving crime scene. I can remember it was a prison takeover, and they were brutalizing these guards. Well, if I had been there, and I explained this to him, if I had been there, I could have told you what we need as evidence over there. I don't need another responsibility or title or anything like that, but I need to be in your back pocket and advising that. So we can get to these forensic types and they become forensic advisors as that case progresses. You're going to make a good inroad to do it. And I'm thinking of Montgomery County did a great job on that. I'm speaking to the Lyon sisters case out of there. And they had them right involved with that. It was very impressive. And what a difference when you see that happen. So I think we're getting to that. That's the way we're going to offset that passivity that's well-deserved because this is such a cautious environment right now. So if we can speed up the forensics, I think we can offset and mitigate that deleterious effect that's coming from their inability to go out and interview people. But if you're making good, solid decisions, I think you can offset that quite a bit. And then it builds confidence, and everybody's relying on those good forensic processes and what they see. You can't refute blood pattern spatter. You can't refute trajectory analysis on a car. And when the faster you move that along and the faster you make that unscientific, then you're moving very, very quick. I guess that 48-hour period, the first 48, right?
Hey,
Yeah,
Joe.
Tom, one of the things that we're doing here, at least with some of our training, I'm also involved with a group where we do some of the advanced training in North Carolina, and simple dowel rods that you buy at a Home Depot, right? And for trajectory analysis, you've seen this,
Yeah.
right? The car's, it's a drive-by. There's 5 shots in the car. Hey, and you got witnesses telling you they were at a certain place. Just sticking a dowel rod in the bullet hole gives you
Right.
just a little bit of an idea from a detective standpoint. But one thing I think you might find interesting is that our coalition, we have a number of crime scene techs involved with our group. So they don't have any sworn experience. It's all just from processing scenes. And, as they can look at a scene very differently because of their expertise. And that's been very helpful, particularly in the blood stain pattern analysis world, directionality of blood. Hey, your victim's sitting here, your suspect's here. It looks like he was hit 4 times, based on the impact and the cast off, right? And the detective's looking at it like, what is this? But they're able to at least bring that, some of those thought process to the table. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. I don't know if you've seen that in other areas or not.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.